Ms. Strazo, are we good to go? Excellent. Good evening, everyone. I hereby call this meeting of Council Committees of October 4th, 2021 to order. Couple of quick things that have just become rote now. Of course, this meeting is being live streamed, so I wanted to let you know that you are being recorded, and please take a moment, I'm actually going to do that too, to make sure that your cell phones are silenced. All right, we begin then with the roll call of members. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo. Ms. Beke.
Here.
Ms. Gregg.
Here.
Ms. Diaz.
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Here.
Mr. Soto. And President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Councilors Arroyo and Soto are excused this evening. We go then to the approval of the September 7th, 2021 committee meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any council comments on the minutes? Hearing none, Mr. Harris.
Ms. Beke.
Aye.
Ms. Gregg.
Aye.
Ms. Diaz.
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina.
Aye.
And President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you. We go then to the Personnel Committee. Councilor Diaz.
Yes, Mr. President. We have nomination of Danielle Keplinger for appointment of the Historical Commission. And is she available to speak to council today?
Yes.
Would you like to address council and tell us your interests?
I have worked in preservation for 20 years. We restore 18th, 19th, and early 20th century buildings in the Mid-Atlantic region. I've been consulting with the Preservation Trust of Lancaster County for the past 2 years, and and now that it's October, in August, the board of directors asked me to be the part-time executive director. So I'm also serving in that capacity for the trust. And when Suzanne Stallings reached out to ask if I would be interested, I was happy to serve, to be able to help, guide the city's decisions in preserving our historic architecture.
And I'm excited, being a woman of color and being part of the Historical Commission. It brings about a lot of history that we have, in regards to African Americans and some of the places where they built, some of the lands they cultured. So I'm really happy that you're taking that role. Of course, we need to ask the committee if they have any questions today.
Please. Thank you. Danielle,
Yes.
thank you so much for being here this evening. I was really impressed by your background. Of course, it's not a prerequisite to serve on our boards and committees and authorities, but your background and long history in historic preservation is welcome, certainly on this body, and I appreciate you being here this evening and your interest. So I fully support you serving. Thank you for being here.
I also just wanted to thank you for your service. And one of the things that I was just curious about, just because we have the opportunity, is what do you think is your perspective or your understanding of the importance of diversity and equity within historical preservation?
I have a podcast too, so I talk to other preservationists regularly. And I always ask at the end trends and challenges in preservation, just to kind of get different perspectives. And what I have seen throughout the past year, maybe even 2, is the trend towards telling a more inclusive story. We can tell the stories that we've always told, but tell the story of everyone that has been. And I feel like that really people identify, if they can identify with the history and feel like they're a part of it, then they care about it. Things don't get preserved if people don't care about it. If a building is not useful, it doesn't get preserved. So I feel very strongly that that telling the whole story is very important. And I think that can be done multiple ways, but I think some of it's just telling the story that's already there that we just haven't been acknowledging.
I really appreciate that. And do you want to like shamelessly plug your podcast?
Oh, it's practical preservation.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any questions from full council?
I don't have any questions, just a comment. Just thank you, Danielle, for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll make a motion then to move this forward to full council next Tuesday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much for your
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to make a nomination for Shelby Lamar for appointment of the Historical Architectural Review Board. And hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I can't improve on what Danielle said. Practical preservation, I think that's incredible. And in fact, that's essentially what I value and what I feel is important. My wife and I moved here in 2009 from Washington, D.C., which has an incredibly rich housing stock that's been at times lovingly cared for and at times demolished unnecessarily. I care a lot about this. I've spent my entire life working in support of nonprofits, so I realize that a lot of the time affordability or the perception of affordability can stand in the way of architectural review. I don't contend to have every answer there, but I do believe that there is far more opportunity for alignment for, as Danielle was saying, affordable restoration than might meet the eye. I'll say that my wife and I were drawn here in part because of downtown Lancaster, and that is not just some of the gem houses on the cornerstones, but the houses in between, the more modest homes. And I know that we are a city, with this centuries-old housing stock where people are routinely using mortar that might be deteriorating the very facades that lend to the appearance of the city. And I know that there are ways of doing that affordably that won't deteriorate the facades. I'm not an architect, I'm not a builder, but I know enough to know that there are solutions that are both affordable and would allow us to preserve an incredibly rich resource.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the task. We do know that there's a lot of residents in Lancaster that really fight for the historical and the preservation of our city, because that's what brings people here to listen to our history. And without having a building that they can refer to is really hurtful, So thank you so much for taking the task and being on the board. Do we have any questions from the committee? Amanda?
Sure. Hi, Shelby. Thank you for being here this evening. I just wanted to mention, I appreciate your personal interest in this and also your background in project management and nonprofit work. There's certainly no shortage of work for the HARB, so I appreciate your enthusiasm and your willingness to serve on that body.
Thank you.
Yeah, also super grateful for all the experience that you're bringing to the table. And I know that you say you don't have an answer, but do you have any sort of like hypothesis of like what as a city we can do to balance out affordability with preservation? Like what are some of the solutions?
Well, I mean, so we have we have Lancaster County Career and Technology Center around the corner. We have HAC. We have people that are training people for the trades. And there's no reason not to train them to use lime in the restoration of mortar alongside Portland cement. There's no reason, we live in an older home. It's increasingly difficult to find people who are willing to work on older homes. That's because these craftsmen age with the housing stock. And yet you pay a rate that's higher for people. So why not train more people to work in older houses? It's not as simple a work, that's for sure. But I think we can really approach this through the workforce and creating affordable options. But, as was referenced, I've spent a lot of my time as a fundraiser. Why not offer some grants to compel people, if in those instances where it is more expensive, to maybe apply for a grant to ensure that they do things in a way that's not just right for the passersby, these old homes, but also to make sure that the quality of the work is held in place so that they're not doing the same repair 10 years later.
I really appreciate that, and I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to these innovative ideas.
Thank you. That's a lot of lift. It's one thing
It
for me
really
to
is.
sit here and say it. It's another
course.
thing to actually see it through, and I appreciate that that would take a lot of doing.
Thank you.
Any questions from full council? And if we don't have any questions, then I'd like to go ahead and move this forward then for a motion.
Second.
And then if everyone agrees, we can move this forward then to October 12th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
All right,
you.
thank you for
Mark.
having me. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
And the next person is just a reappointment, which is the nomination of Amanda Lehman. For the Airport Authority. Hi,
Hi.
Amanda. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me.
If you'd like to address council, you're welcome to.
I've been very honored to serve for the past 4 years with the Airport Authority as your representative there. I'm currently the treasurer for the Airport Authority. I know that you've gotten many of the reports from the airport, and we have had a robust year, and we're very excited that our bounce back from the COVID has been very positive. Do you have any questions for me?
Do we have any questions from the committee?
If I may, Amanda, could you just tell council about the new executive director and a little bit about what's going on out there?
Sure. So our prior executive director, Dave, retired this year after 40-plus years of service. So it was a really significant transition for us and something that we planned for, did a wide search to find a new executive director. We now have our new executive director. Ed is wonderful, comes with a great background and experience, and we really look forward to the service he can provide. He's got excellent aviation experience. One of the benefits that we have up at the airport is that in addition to the aviation service we have, we also are, maybe you can think about some of the land development that we do up there, because we own a lot of property outside of the fence is what we call it. So Ed has worked very hard to become acclimated with what we do up there, and then we're trying to grow that as well. So we have alternate sources of revenue for the airport, so we don't have to turn back to county and city resources.
Any other questions? Well, I thank you so much. I know it's a lot of hard work. And I'd like to go ahead and make a motion.
Second.
Amanda? Did she second it? Oh, okay, sorry. I'd like to go ahead and move this forward into October 12th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank
Haven't
you.
seen you in a while.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Take care. And if I may, I would like Mark, if he would like to come and present us with a Human Relations Commission update.
Sure, and I also have Jasmine here, who's the chair of the advisory council, too. I'm the chair of the commission itself.
Hello.
Welcome.
Okay, so, again, I think all of you are kind of familiar with the Human Relations Commission. I became acting chair earlier this spring, and I had originally been on the advisory council for a number of years, and last fall moved into this position. So this is my first report to you. And I'm having trouble finding my... the primary thing is we got a new investigator in July, Neil, and he came in a recommendation of Barry, who worked with him before. Neil also helped write the original joint city-county Human Relations Commission ordinance, so he had a lot of familiarity with it. At that time, we also increased the pay scale. We had been paying $35 an hour, and we're having trouble finding replacements at that rate if they're a lawyer. And so we raised that to $50 an hour. That seems to be working really well. He's been in that position since July. During the time he's been on, he's handled 10 calls that we got. Some of them preceded when he actually became investigator. Of those, 2 of the 10 calls resulted in the filing of formal complaints. Both of those were found without merit right now. So what happens then is the complainant gets a letter back saying why merit wasn't found, and they have the right to appeal that to the commission. Neither of those have appealed it. Of the other 8 calls, 2 were matters outside the city. One was a workers' compensation issue. One was a wage and hour law dispute. One was a termination because of criminal record, and that's not covered in our ordinance. One involved a possible claim of discrimination by a public authority because of race, but that has not been followed up with a formal complaint. It was just the telephone call. One involved an individual who's already has a complaint with the State Human Relations Commission and is pursuing it there, and one was someone with a claim about prison conditions. And the way complaints are received, we have a phone line and we have the mailbox. Currently, Neil checks the phone line, and we also have someone to help with, it's in Spanish and English. So we have someone in the mayor's office to help with translation if we get, and we have gotten ones already that were completely in Spanish. And then there's also a mailbox, and I monitor the mailbox and then just turn it over to Neil. And do you want to talk a little bit about the advisory commission?
Okay. So we've since changed our name to the Advisory Council, I think as per City Council. I've served on the board for numerous years. I took over the chairship the end of last year to try to keep it together, since the Advisory Council was basically for community events and getting the word out to the community. And since we were unable to do so because of COVID, we just continued having our monthly meetings via Zoom, not on July or December months, but we did successfully hold our meetings. And in lieu of having events out in the community, we started quarterly town hall meetings. And with these town hall meetings, we wanted to touch on the different groups that we protect in our city's ordinance. So we've had 3 so far. One's coming up around voting rights and just making sure people are aware of like their voting rights at the polls. So that's going to be next Wednesday at City Hall. That's going to be our first live event. The other ones were streamed via Facebook through our HRC webpage, using the help of TCP services. So right now we're working with a pretty full advisory council. We have 11 members. What else can I tell you? We do have a secretary. During this time, we try to streamline some of the processes and get it more together. So we do now have like an official Lancaster County or Lancaster City HRC email for both Mark and I. So all of our records are kept there, or if you ever need emails or communication. We take our monthly meeting notes and agenda and have that available to you. So yes, the next town hall meeting is Wednesday here at City Hall. If you can attend, it'll start at 6:30. And then the next project we're working on in the new year, 2022, is we want to implement this project called a human library planning. So we are slated to do that in February of 2022. We're going to work through those details at our next meeting in October. Any questions? Oh, yes, and we're finally going to have an event. We're going to an event, Lancaster Pride. So that's going to be October 24th. We finally get to get back out there into the community.
Does any council member have any questions?
Counselor Diaz. Hi, guys. Thank you for
Hello.
coming. Can you tell me more about the Human Library Project?
So with Barry Handwerger, did I say his name right? I always
got
mess
it.
up his name. It's a lot of berries.
Yeah.
He introduced this project that they do in Denmark, where you pick a library book, which is really someone's story about, their discrimination story. So we want to turn this into like a live event at different venues in the city. We're looking at the February one to be at Zetropolis. One of our advisory council members, she is the general manager there. So we're trying to put that together in more of a small, like maybe 4 library books. So we just thought it would be like a thoughtful way of discussing discrimination and allowing other people to see other people's stories and hopefully being able to connect through those stories.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it. One of the questions that I do have is, you reported that there were 10 calls. So to me, that is a little surprisingly low, just considering the different complaints that I hear in the community. So I'm interested to see what strategies you all are using to address barriers that are possibly keeping that number relatively low. And in addition to the events, what's community outreach looking like? Or how do you plan to really instill your mission into our community so that the community can really lean on you?
Well, I think there are a lot of barriers in the sense that to file a formal complaint, it really takes so much from the person there's a lot of fear around that. And so we do help guide that as much as possible. One thing that I've always kind of hoped for, in the very beginning, we did have someone to actually answer a phone in the mayor's office. Oh, not in the mayor's office, but in City Hall. And, you have to be mindful about confidentiality and things like that with a person. But I do think that might be one of the best ways to not have a barrier right away, that there's someone that someone could turn to and get a real person immediately. I think the online works pretty well. I still think it's a little hard in the city website to always find exactly what you want. Some of the community events, I think it's been hard because we haven't been out there, but it really helps to, usually we were at the St. Juan Batista Festival and Pride always, and so not being out there in front of people, that's where the advisory council really helps to kind of reach out and be a voice for people to talk to.
Thank you for that. And I also understand that you all are dealing with resource constraints and how much you can do. But one of the things that I'm curious of as well is, are you all kind of thinking through everything that we hear in the community and that we know is happening? And to be specific, for example, discrimination that happens at Water Street, right, when it comes to the shelter. So are you all having conversations or strategizing around how we can be proactive in these spaces that we do know that discrimination takes place instead of being reactive?
Wait, I didn't hear who you.
Yeah.
Water Street Rescue Mission.
Oh.
That's just as an example.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So,
didn't hear that.
So what I'm trying to get at is are you all trying and thinking through as a group about how we can be proactive to prevent discrimination instead of simply being reactive?
Right. I do think some of that's through educational things, and I know there's been some discussion about working with landlords and things a little bit more proactively there that's coming up. We have to be a little careful because we can't be, the commission itself can't be prejudiced before something happens. And there is, the ordinance does exempt some religious organizations. So the issue there will be, is this a religious organization or not?
Right.
So on that particular one, I would feel a little uncomfortable pushing directly towards, a specific person that or even really commenting on it, just because I would like to remain open to whatever may come. And actually in the city, I don't know if you're aware, we've never had a case go the whole way to the commission. It's always resolved, basically you work through to try to mediate it and get some resolution that the complainant is okay with. And it's always stopped, and some of that's because it's always a private conversation until it goes before the commission itself, and that's when it's really public knowledge. And so I think most organizations strive to avoid that. In fact, I think that's where most our power is, really. And so beyond that, if we don't get a formal complaint from someone, it's hard, and if you have any ideas,
Yeah.
it's hard for the commission to really address it directly.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. I'm actually just interested to hear how, if at all, having a dedicated staff person has impacted the flow of meetings, operation, anything like that.
I feel it's been great. It's really been helpful, especially with some of the new legislation that we have to be aware of. It really does help to have Barry there, and I think that was a great idea. And he's also attended all the advisory council. Do you have anything to add? No. Yeah, I think it's been great.
Thank you.
Well, if no one else has any questions, do we have any questions from the public by chance? No? Thank you so much for the update.
And thank you so much. And again, if anyone wants to have additional conversations, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's all I have, President.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. That brings us to the Community Planning Committee. Councilor Craig, please.
Thank you, Council President. I'm calling the community planning meeting to order, committee meeting to order. We are going to review Administration Resolution Number 53, authorizing an application for a Keystone Community Grant on behalf of Lancaster Public Library. Good evening, ladies.
Hello, hi. My name is Jamie Hall, and I'm the Director of Donor Relations at Lancaster Public Library.
I'm Henrietta Heisler. I'm on the Board of Trustees as well as the head of the capital campaign for our new library that'll be at Barney Yule Plaza.
And thank you so much for having us here tonight. We are here to ask for your extended support in your continued support through the Keystone Grant. The Keystone Grant is a library-specific grant in the state of Pennsylvania, and it is towards the rehabilitation or new construction of libraries. So this grant covers up to 50% of a project, a building project, with a max of $750,000. We will be seeking the full amount of $750,000 for our project. Our project is currently still in its, what we're calling the quiet phase. One of the things that has kept us in this quiet phase is COVID and the complications that have come along. I know that we were here last month, so I'm not going to bore you again. No, it's exciting stuff, but we're very pleased with how the campaign is going, even though we are in the quiet phase. We do see that our budget may have to increase, and that's why funding needs to be varied. Not only is it from our generous donors and community, but also from sources such as these grants. We have had a lot of assistance in this grant from Megan Blackman in your office, and Megan has been fantastic, and we're very appreciative. This is a requirement of the grant, is that we have this signed resolution and that we have your support. And it will be the municipality that will be applying for the grant on our behalf.
So we hope to have everyone's support because as you can see from the people who are before us in the HR commission that they actually use the library. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear. We hope you have your support. You can see that there are people who collaborate with the Lancaster Public Library, like the HR group that's going to have their event in the in the winter. And we hope to collaborate with more people. We've been reaching out to other people. It's just such an amazing organization. And in light of some of the issues that have been surrounding our public art, I have come up with Lancaster Public Library is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it is, it truly is. It's just the most wonderful place for the community because it's all free and they have so many incredible services, have helped start so many businesses, helped children to learn to read, taught English as a second language, allowed people to get passports. It's just an amazing place and I'm happy to have been supporting it for the last 8 years.
Thank you, ladies. Are there questions from the committee?
I agree with everything you said. I think that the public library is one of the best resources that we have in the community. And in fact, it's the only place you can go nowadays where you don't have to spend a single dollar on anything. So I appreciate the both of you going out there and fighting for these dollars because we're all going to need them. And I'm really excited for your doors to open.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from full council?
Counselor Craig. Thank you. Hi, ladies. Just a question about the grant itself and sort of the mechanics of it. So you're applying for the maximum amount available. Is there a scenario in which you'd be approved for a lesser amount? Or is it sort of an all or nothing situation?
I believe it's an all or nothing situation.
Okay.
And we do have to have matching funds, and we do have those matching funds secured at this time through fundraising.
Great. Thank you.
And if I could just add, the library is also has requested support from the Capital Assistance Program. That is being supported, I believe, through our delegates here in Lancaster County, and that is a project that I've also been supportive as I've been talking to folks in the legislature and the governor's office. In addition to other projects here in the city, Lancaster Public Library is very, very important, and we want to see that funding come through, and that would be also, I believe, did you apply through the city for that as well? Yes, so the city is helping to facilitate their RCAP grant as well as this Keystone Grant, and it is a tremendous amount of staff work, but we feel really strongly about the impact that this project has in our community and look forward to supporting it further. Thank you.
And thank you for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Strauss. We
Are there any
appreciate that
questions
very
from the
much.
public?
Actually,
There we go.
Just wondering what the amount of the RCAP grant is, what the total budget is, and what the timeline is.
Sure, absolutely. So the timeline has shifted some through COVID, but we, knock on wood, so far has all been okay for Lancaster Public Library. So we are anticipating getting the shell of our building in the first quarter of next year, starting construction of March of 2022, having a 10-month fit out of that space, and then opening the library Q1 of 2023. We say that with a little asterisk and understanding that things aren't running as smoothly as they have in years in past. But, as I said, knock on wood, it continues to be as going as well as it has. As for the RCAP that we applied for $2.5 million, and that would be in addition to the Keystone, which is $750,000. Our budget right now, that is the reason we have remained in that quiet phase, because we had developed a budget in January of 2020. It seems like a whole lifetime ago, and those numbers have changed. We are going to be releasing the budget in February of 2022, in that we have had some estimates. It is still very close to our first budget, but we are looking to see, we believe that will increase due to supply chain issues and some of the complications of COVID-19.
I think it's gone up a lot. It's gone up like $1 million. It's a lot. It's a lot more than I have to
What is
raise.
the total? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Well, we don't fully know the total yet,
gotcha.
but
Okay.
from the first budget to now, which is still not 100% sorted out, it's gone up at least $1 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot more money for us to have to raise. So, everything we can get from the support of the city and the state is incredibly helpful.
I just want to give, you're acknowledging Megan and the support from the city, but let me just also say, you wrote these proposals. We are facilitating the paperwork and the documentation and all of that stuff. So yes, it's work for us, but really you have facilitated it, and we appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you.
Jamie does a remarkable job.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I seen one other hand. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
So I covered other projects in the city and understand that, construction and there's a lot more delays and supply shortages and price fluctuations than is normally the case. So understand you don't want to give a figure. Is there any chance you could at least give a range where you think we're in the neighborhood of X to Y?
Sure.
Well, it looks like it's going to be about $8 million. Originally, we thought it was about 6.9, and it looks like it's going to go up to 8, and there's still some things that are being sorted out, so a little nervous it might even go more, but we'll do our best to be stewards of the money we receive, and I think we do a really good job of that.
We recognize that this is a once-in-a-generation build, so we want to make sure that we are building it for, the next 100 years and more. So it is a costly project, but we also, I promise, as a library, we've gotten very good at being frugal. And
Yes.
so we are going to make
True.
sure that these dollars are used in the best way possible.
Thank you, ladies. I think there was one other question.
Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. So I appreciate you guys acknowledging this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The two of you having done work with the library, of course. I actually don't want to talk about the future project construction. I want to know, in your personal opinion, do you think the old structure of the library is worth its historic value? It's worth preserving?
I personally think that the people who purchase it believe that. I don't think you have to worry about that. I do think that they're planning to keep the facade as it is, but, I mean, I have no crystal ball, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, and I do, we see that this is a modern library that will just make such a better community center, well beyond the books. And our current location does not allow for that flexibility. So we're keeping that flexibility in mind that, you don't have two women in front of you guys in 60 years asking for more money for a different location. We really want to make this that it can continue to be a modern library for years to come.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the public? Hearing none, I motion that we move this to full council on the 12th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the city's support.
That will conclude, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Craig, and thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the Finance Committee. Councilor Bakay.
Thank you, Council President. I see Mr. Hopkins is getting into place. We have 3 items on our agenda this evening. The first 2, resolutions 54 and 55, are related. And I believe that's what we'll be hearing from Mr. Hopkins from first. They're amendments to the capital improvement plans. And we have some paperwork that's coming down that we'll pass down. Thank you. And counselors, I think these also came to your inbox.
Yes,
this
and
afternoon.
I apologize that the Exhibit A for Resolution 55 that I sent Bernie about an hour ago was the wrong one, so I resent. I'm not sure which one you got electronically, but what you have in front of you is the corrected one.
Patrick, would you mind removing your mask just so that,
Sure.
Thank you. Having a hard time hearing.
Okay, so you have 2 resolutions in front of you, resolution number 54 and 55. They are essentially doing the same thing mechanically, but they are separate resolutions because the first one is making amendments to projects from the 2016A bond fund, which was a bond issue that we did in 2016, strangely enough, that only funded general fund projects. The second resolution, number 55, was a larger bond issue that we did in 2018, and that actually had general fund, stormwater management, sewer fund, and sewer, stormwater, water, and general fund projects. Thank you.
All the things.
All together. So I'll start with resolution number 54. And just as a sort of reminder for council members and anybody in the public who might be interested, when we do a bond issue, that bond issue, there should be one stapled copy and one one-page copy. That's the, okay, sorry. And hopefully this thing will actually stay on in front of you.
I've got your desktop.
And
right
why
now.
does nothing ever work when we want it to work?
Oh, yeah.
While they're doing that, Tim, do you?
Is there one of each there? Okay. We all
Okay.
love spreadsheets.
So as a reminder, when city council adopts the ordinance that finalizes a bond issue, you approve a list of projects, and with those projects, you approve a list of budgets. In the ordinance that you approve, or that city council approves whenever, in whichever year the bond issue is done, there's also language in that ordinance that allows modifications to the project list. So any approved project, we can either eliminate projects, amend the project budgets, or add new projects along the way, as long as they come back for city council approval by resolution. So resolution number 54 is for 2016A bond fund. And I'll say for both of these, we're getting down to the point where we're basically reallocating either unspent dollars from projects that had funds budgeted to them, or we are taking completely unallocated funds and putting them to an individual project. So with Resolution 54, we basically have one project that has funds remaining in it, and it's the Public Works Operations Center. We've talked about this several times as we were talking about the funding for the gap or the gap funding for the East King Street Fire Station project. So we have about $2,645,000 remaining in that Public Works Operations Center project. That project clearly is completed. We're in that building, so we can reallocate those funds to other projects. Back in May, when we looked at the financing for the fire station, we were looking at a gap of somewhere in the $1.4 million range. We've gotten, as you all have seen, if you've driven out East King Street, you see we've got steel up, we've got cinder block walls are going up. So any of the concerns that we had about underground were fortunately didn't come into play, but we still have some contingency built into the construction budget of about 5%. And so some of this $1.1 million that we were allocating is for real construction, and some of it is for contingency. We don't anticipate, hopefully, that 5% contingency will be needed, or at least not all of it. So hopefully some of that 1.1 million won't actually be spent on that project. But what we're doing here is taking the funds from a currently approved project to creating 3 new projects, because these are projects that were not on the original project list for 2016 bond fund. So 1.1 million for East King Street Fire Station. So that would be a new project number 6. New project number 7 is for Yule Plaza, not including stormwater elements, and you'll see that in the 2018 amendments. So for Yule Plaza, we've gone out to bid. We have bids back, and when we add those bids up and include some contingency, we have a total project cost of about $3.3 million. We have right now a outstanding CRIZ grant of about $1.8 million. We have about $145,000 of currently approved and unused funds in the 2018 bond fund. So those two added together with a budget of $3.3 million means we have about $1,420,000 remaining to fund. So what we're doing here is funding $760,000 from the 2016A bond fund. The other piece of that is stormwater related, and you'll see that other piece in the Resolution 55 presentation. And then the last piece of this is street paving in 2022, and really that is sort of like 2022 and maybe rolling into 2023, depending on weather and full funding and what the project bids turn out to be. But essentially taking the remainder of the dollars not allocated to East King Street Fire Station and Yule Plaza and putting those towards street paving. And one of the things that we have done in the last several years is matched bond fund proceeds used for street paving, sorry, along with liquid fuels funding of somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 and some allocation of CDBG funding. And that number has changed over the years. The ideal goal is somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million for street paving. So this is just one element of that $2 million total project budget. So that's sort of the simplified version. The more complicated version, which typically nobody ever wants to look at, is sort of at the top of this spreadsheet is showing amended project budget for project number 2, which is the Ops Center. So in the proposed budget amendment column, you see we're removing $2,645,000 from that project budget, and then it drops down to the $1.1 million for the fire station, $760,000 for Yule Plaza, and $785,000 for street paving. One other thing I want to note here is that if the fire station construction costs don't amount to that, we don't need that full $1.1 million. What we would likely do is reallocate those funds to street paving. If we're talking about $100,000 or $200,000. If it's significantly more than that, then we'll have another discussion. But we would think that we would put that towards street paving as well. And then the same would go for Yule Plaza. Again, that's bids. The $3.3 million number is bids plus contingency. We always try to bump the contingency number up more than we really think we're going to need. So hopefully that $3.3 million number is going to end up being lower when we get the project completed. So I want to pause there because that's the end of the 2016 piece before we go to 2017, or I'm sorry, the 2018. No questions. Okay.
Is your mic on?
Sorry about that, about the Yule Plaza. The stormwater, can you give me kind of an idea what exactly else needs to be done in reference to that particular projects?
I cannot. I can give you a number for I can give you the cost, but beyond that, and I'm not sure, Steve, if you know the elements or not.
I can broadly talk about it, and we can get you more information, Councilor Diaz. The stormwater, which is part of the next resolution, is going to allocate funds. And essentially what is happening is that we are going to construct an underground infiltration bed in the center of Yule Plaza to manage the stormwater that's coming off of that block. And so what I'll do is make sure that you get information about the total cost for that, as well as the capture volume for that, so that you can understand what we're doing. This is going to be a paved over area, and we look for opportunities with every project that we're doing to displace water out of our combined sewer system and into the ground. And so this is just another one of those projects.
Thank you, Patrick.
Sure. I didn't do a thing, but okay. So moving on to the 2018, as I said, this includes both general fund projects and stormwater management projects. So with this one, we've got 3 projects. Number 13, which was the traffic controller upgrade. Number 17, which was the Manor Street pedestrian light project. And then number 24, which was the city storage facility renovation. That was where we repurposed property on Beaver Street that had been water T&D facility and turned it into some city storage facility. So those 3 project budgets, those 3 projects are completed, and they have the amounts that you see there remaining that can be reallocated to other projects. We then have a total of $427,000, a little bit over that, of unallocated principal and interest that has not been allocated to any specific project that council has already approved. And so that total is $775,442. And then again, we can reallocate those funds to other projects. In this case, we're not creating any new projects in the general fund portion. We're simply increasing project budgets with the 3 projects that you see there. Project number 11, which is the Water Street Bike Boulevard, and that is additional design and engineering for that project. For the project number 16, the Christian Street Bikeway, that's actually both additional engineering but also construction of more of the work along that Christian Street Bikeway. And in this case, it's from East Chestnut Street to East Orange Street. So another several blocks, and including going, through this area here behind 101 and the new parking garage. And then lastly, this is rather than create a new project for 2022 and beyond street paving, it just seemed to make sense to add additional funds to what was already an approved street paving project budget. And so in this case, we're taking the remainder of $175,442 and allocating that to project number 22, which was already for street paving. And in the same vein as I talked about before, if there are funds available out of the project 11 and 16, when those are completed, those may well also fall to street paving. But we won't know that until those projects are a little bit further along. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions about this piece of it, because then the next piece is the stormwater.
Patrick, are there similar contingencies built into the Water Street Bike Boulevard and Christian Street Bike Boulevard project in this allocation?
The
A little different if it's engineering.
Yeah, as I remember it, the Water Street piece is really design and engineering, and so I don't think there's any contingency built in there. I believe that there is built into the Christian Street Bikeway, because that 400,000 number is actually higher now than it was last Wednesday when I talked with Cindy McCormick. So she's built in a little bit of extra there, just because of unknowns, obviously, that come up during those projects.
Thank you.
Patrick, when it comes to your pavement management plan, how much of both of your prior, with 2022, is invested in the southeast of the $2 million? And same thing with the 1.5 million. How much are we investing specifically in the southeast?
So that's another question that I can't answer. And I don't actually know that we have the 2022 street paving plan determined
Finalized,
yet. Okay.
no. The list of streets are here. They're on the current construction project. And so we did just finish paving Howard Avenue, East Strawberry Street, Rockland, Farnham, Green, Conestoga, Hager. That's sort of on the border, but many in the southeast.
When the pavement plans are being developed, are we looking at how historically we've been investing in communities and trying to equitably invest more in those communities than we have in the past when we're doing these type of projects?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
That pavement management plan was initiated maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that, really to review the condition of streets throughout the entire city. And almost by definition, the streets that were in the worst case, obviously, were those ones that were not done over a period of years or decades. It's pretty clear to everybody there's a lot of catch up to do. And it's really why we're trying to push as much of the funding that's available outside of these other projects into street paving, and trying to sort of goose the number that we get from liquid fuels funds, which unfortunately has dropped over the last 2 years, and try to get as much funding into street paving as we can.
Thank you.
Patrick, I do have a question. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. The 175,442 will be added to the 785?
Yes, that's right. So the funding from 2016 added to the 175 will produce it's close to $1 million. It's not quite $1 million, but it'll be close to $1 million of general fund bond proceeds that would then we would add to that liquid fuels funds and potentially some CDBG funding to total somewhere near $2 million for street paving in 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, then moving on to stormwater management. In this case, we have really two elements of funds that were
I'm gonna have Patrick continue, and then once he's done with the other part of it, then okay, thank you.
That's what your hand, okay, got it.
Like an auctioneer up here.
So in this case, so we have project number 7, which was the Gross Run daylighting. So that was a project behind McCaskey that was actually part of our EPA consent decree agreement that included a supplemental environmental project. We were required to complete that, I think, by the end of June. And we completed that project by the end of June. So, and that came in, the original budget for that project was $3 million, and we came in just a little over $2.3 million. So we have $696,026 to reallocate. And then we have an additional $3,364,000 of unallocated principal and interest to also allocate. One project that we've talked about here before when a number of grant applications have come up is the Longs Park Wetlands Project, which I think has at least 3, if not 4, grants that are also being developed and plugged into that project. It looks like at this point the gap in that we need to finance outside of grant funds is around $770,000. Because we are not at the stage where we actually had bids in hand, trying to add a little bit to that and bring the total project budget up to $1 million. If you're looking at this page here, City Council has already approved $384,000 for this project, so that's why it's adding $616 to bring it up to the total of $1 million. And then the other thing that we've done, well, let me skip down to the new project, so this is the stormwater elements for Yule Plaza. So we're adding $616 for Longs Park Wetlands, and then adding $660,000, which is a new project in this bond fund for the Yule Plaza stormwater elements that the mayor addressed. What remains then is just under $2.8 million that's not been allocated to any specific projects. And what we'd like to do there is reallocate all of those funds to the general green infrastructure construction project, which is project number 8. When we brought the 2018 bond issue to you on the project list, we had a long list of individual projects that had project budgets to them. In retrospect, that didn't make a lot of sense because we had sort of theoretical projects, conceptual projects, and somewhat best guess estimates for the budgets for those individual projects. They were all green infrastructure construction projects, and the iteration of getting those projects designed and bid ultimately was going to end up us having to come back to City Council multiple times to make project budget amendments, and that didn't make a lot of sense. Because they're all general green infrastructure construction projects, it made more sense to lump everything into that one project budget, into project number 8. And then as projects are coming forward and, we can report, Mr. Campbell and others within Public Works can report on what those projects are. Ones I know of right now, there's a project on St. Joseph Street that's happening off of Hershey Avenue. That's a project that's occurring right now that's related to stormwater. There's one coming, I believe, on Highland Avenue and a few others that are sort of in the either construction, they're under construction now or are coming in the near future. So all of those projects would be funded out of that project number 8 line item.
All right, thank you. Questions from council on resolution 55?
Real quick. It's going to be probably a curveball. Any way to allocate anything in relations to, since we're talking about Longs Park and the wetland, but there's also an issue with the horse stalls that are deteriorating. Is there anything
Out
down
at
there?
Longs Park.
Yes.
Mayor, did you want to? So the Police Foundation has been working to secure funding for that project itself, which would be, we hope, can be done completely outside of using any bond funds and can actually use contributions that have come into the Police Foundation for that project.
Okay. I understand the whole scope of that, but if they're short, is there any way to use any type of bond funding for that? I mean,
If that was the decision, we would end up having, we would come back to city council and it would be an allocation either of unspent dollars at this point in the 2018 bond fund. That's not contemplated right now. It's obviously, it's a possibility, but we're hoping that the Police Foundation funding can do that whole project.
I'm an advocate, obviously, so I want animals
Understood.
to be very well sheltered. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
Council President.
Just because I'm curious, following the line of Councilor Diaz's question, you wouldn't happen to have an estimate of the project costs on the stables, would you?
I'm sorry, on,
I think,
I'm sorry, I'm not.
There hasn't been
Okay.
a cost estimate. I know that, I mean, I have regularly asked for an update about this because I do know that the stables are at the end of their useful life, and we are talking about resiting the barn for the police horses, and that and the size of the footprint that's necessary in Longs Park for that facility, and that's, it just hasn't been developed yet. The project costs and the timeline and the siting for where it will even be just hasn't been developed to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Tim.
Tim Stoolter, One United Lancaster.
There you go.
uh-oh, he's taking a seat.
Uh-oh.
This is-
3
No,
minutes.
just a quick mop-up questions. First of all, regarding the stables, are they considered county property? I mean, that's city property.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, in Longs Park City property, yes.
Okay. On the bike facilities, would that then be the complete budget for those two projects?
It would be the complete budget for the Christian Street Bikeway to the extent that complete at this point is to East Orange Street. I believe the plans are to take the Christian Street Bikeway further south than that, so this really this adds 2 additional blocks.
So that gets us, I
Chestnut to
believe,
Orange
from Amtrak to Orange.
Well, the work has been done from McGovern Avenue up to East Chestnut Street, and so this would take it an additional 2 blocks.
Okay, so this is the 2 blocks, Chestnut
Right.
to Orange. Okay.
Um,
And Water Street?
And then Water Street Bikeway, what the $200,000 additional there is, this is only design and engineering. This is not construction at all.
Okay. And then timeline for Yule Plaza?
I believe the timeline is for construction to start in March of 2022 and be completed by year end.
Mr. Campbell is nodding approvingly.
Is that, okay.
Thank you much.
Any other comments from the public?
Can we go back to the 2016? Okay, under 2016, it says that the stormwater is not included.
But isn't that like a ordinance or something that council passed, that anytime we do new reconstruction, that we have to include the stormwater in creating the building? And why wasn't that addressed then, that we're adding money to it now?
So this is, I just want to make sure I'm giving the right answer that's
Okay.
clear. So the Yule Plaza had not been in this 2016 bond fund. Yule Plaza wasn't a project that was funded at all. We have a number of different funding sources for the project. One was original funds from the 2018 bond fund. And then we also have a CRIZ grant that was a total of about $2.2 million, 300,000 of which has already been expended. So there's about 1.8 million left. When we went out to bid for the project, that does include stormwater elements. So we are doing the stormwater for that project. When we went out to bid, the total bids came back at about $3 million. The $3.3 million number comes from adding 10% for contingency, unknown things that happened, during the project. So total budget of $3.3 million. We have a little over $2 million of funds available to us through the CRIZ and through other bond proceeds. So the 760 that's on here is the rest of the project funding except for stormwater. And then the stormwater piece is getting funded here. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I haven't gone far enough.
There you go.
The stormwater elements are getting funded here. So the stormwater element, when they did the bids, they were able to separate out how much of the project cost is going to be related to stormwater. So it's $660,000. So we're using the stormwater bond fund proceeds to complete that part of the project.
Right, so they were off like, what, $1 million and some dollars for the Yule Plaza? That we're adding 760?
It was always known,
660?
when the CRIZ Authority approved the funding, just over $2.2 million, it was known that there was going to need to be some level of funding outside of just the CRIZ to fund that project.
Right.
But until we went out to bid, we didn't know what that number was going to be.
Okay.
And so now that we've actually have bids in hand, we have construction costs that are known, we add the 10% contingency, and now we're filling the gap.
And that was over the contingency that they had set aside for the plaza. This additional money that we're adding to. Because we included a contingency, I'm sure if we did a construction bid and a plan, there was a contingency in case it went over, I know we would have included that. And this is in addition to the contingency that they have, that we're adding this money to that?
No, we had some cost estimates early on. This is pre-COVID cost estimates.
Right.
We got, the CRIZ Authority approved a total of a little bit over $2.2 million of funding for the project. Okay. So that we have or will have through several years of CRIZ allocations. What we didn't know was what the actual construction cost was going to be. Those bids just went out and were received within the last month, Steve? Is that right? So within the last month, we actually got the construction bids back. They came in at $3 million. We added another 10% to that, so another $300,000 of contingency for total cost of $3.3 million. And what we're doing here is funding the non-stormwater and the stormwater gap in financing between what we have from the CRIZ and what the total project cost plus contingency will be.
Okay. Can we still go back to?
I got the zapper here.
Right. So I want to go back to the 2016. Okay, so up top, project number 2, Public Works Operations Center. That 2,645 million is money that was not spent?
Yes.
Okay, on paving, I'm thinking of Public Works addresses.
No,
what?
just on the operations center that was built off of Riverside Avenue out in Lancaster Township.
So my question, I'm wondering, why wouldn't that have stayed in the Public Works Department to address the issues that we have with our streets, our stop signs, our potholes? Doesn't Public Works address all of that?
It is. Darlene, that's for the construction of a new operations center.
Right, and
And
it was
so,
leftover money, I
yes,
understand
and
that.
so those funds are going into Yule Plaza, which is Public Works. East King Street Fire Station is being managed by Public Works.
understand that.
And street paving. So it's all staying in Public Works.
So it is going to,
Yes.
so, but we're only putting 785,000 in the street paving, correct?
785 plus another 175 from the 2018 funds,
Plus liquid
plus
fuels.
750,000 from liquid fuels, and then some element
CDBG.
potentially of CDBG funding for
Okay,
street.
'cause
So
if I-
total about $2 million.
Right, because if I'm correct, I think last year we was in here, Steve, and talked to you about the streets that were going to be paved and already included. So when I see all this going in there, I would ask council before you approve this, that you address some of the major streets and make sure that's included in the street paving. Pershing Avenue is so bad. You know, we're talking about southeast, northwest, northeast. We should identify streets that we know or your constituents know that are really bad and need addressed by the city if we're going to add extra money into the paving, rather than just say over here, over there, it's in the paving, because you know everyone comes in here and complains about potholes in the streets. So I would hope that council, before you would approve it, you would at least have some identified areas that are definitely going to be included and be spent with this money that's being reallocated to the street, Public Works Department.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about, thank you, Darlene, a little bit just how we make decisions about the street paving plan.
Yeah, so every year, we try to allocate at least $2 million to street paving, and we review street paving conditions. And so that list, we can certainly share with council. As we are now going through, DPW is going through its capital planning process for 2022. And so I will be the first to tell you that we are behind. We lost time last year, and there were some streets that we intended to get to in 2021 that got pushed to 2022. And so we are in the process of catching up, and I'd be happy, Steve can share the list for 22 paving with council when that is complete. I don't think we're there yet.
Please, Mr. Campbell.
Oh, sorry.
We're not there yet. We're putting together, we're working with what's called a pavement condition index, as well as confirming with the different utilities when and how those utilities can be done. But I will say that the vast majority of the streets that were committed to you last year were actually done during this year. And because we're doing some of the work self-performing, we're able to get more of the work done, especially if there are not heavy utilities in those particular areas. This is allowing us to get a little bit further ahead. And because, as the mayor had indicated, we're looking at at Southeast, but also at the pavement condition index, we're looking at those streets or roads and pavements that have been neglected for much too long and putting them on a higher priority. That's part of how we're trying to catch up with the work that's way behind. And I will say that even though there's a lot of those very poor streets in Southeast, there are several poor streets in different parts of the city as well. But the lion's share, I would say, is in Southeast, and they're the high priority. I will be able to share with you the confirmed list once it's completed, which I am expecting will be within the next few weeks.
And what does the paving index include?
The paving,
Did you use?
the paving condition index indicates several things. It indicates how old the street is, what the condition of the pavement is, if it's asphalt versus concrete versus a different kind of thing. They have different expected useful lives. So if it's certain kinds of materials, it will have a longer expected life, even if there's a lot of cracks in it. It also tries to confirm the condition of the curbs and the other infrastructure that is knit into the pavement. It does not evaluate the condition of the utilities that are under the streets.
Right.
That's a separate assessment, but it's absolutely critical to determining which streets get done, because you don't want to put in a new street and then have to tear up that same street within a year or two because of bad utilities.
Right. And just this one question, don't have put nothing to do with this. Who goes out and checks once we get our streets paved, that they're done right and they last? Because we had some streets that were paved are in poor condition now. Who goes out to verify that from the city that said, this street is paved and it's done right, the grade's right, you know?
We have several inspectors, and some of the pavement, if it was not necessarily, if it was a repair as opposed to a full replacement, it may deteriorate faster. So if it's a full replacement, we're talking about grading it and grinding the streets down, et cetera. That's basically a full replacement. But in many cases, we're just patching or just doing a surface cover, and that may account for certain streets deteriorating a bit faster than others.
But somebody goes out and checks. Okay.
Yes.
you.
If we could go to the next one, 2018, sorry.
I'm glad I brought this clicker along today. Of course, it's not working for me now, but.
Okay.
Oh,
No, I'm just doing it the old-fashioned way.
oh, okay. Can I see?
The 2018 bonds, is that the one you had a comment on?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so when we're talking about the Water Street Bike Boulevard, and I think like for all of our bike paths, didn't we already hire a consultant and an engineer to determine where would be the best bike paths within the city? Didn't we already hire a consultant and an engineer to explain?
Yes, we had developed an active transportation plan that was in
Yes,
conjunction with the county. And this is about the design and construction of this bike path that will go all the way down Water Street into areas where it's not paved at this
Right,
point.
because I thought you said part of it was just for design and engineering.
So the Water Street, the project number 11, that Bike Boulevard piece, that is additional funding for design and engineering, which is for design and engineering of a Water Street Bike Boulevard. So Water Street was the chosen street, but then there's design and engineering that has to go into into actually designing the project so
Constructing.
that it can be
So
constructed.
different than what the consultants we already paid for to do.
Yes.
Because now there's actual
Different type
construction
of work,
happening, is that?
yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then for the Christian Street Bikeway, now, which one was only going to do 2 blocks?
Christian Street.
Christian
Christian
Street.
Street, that's what I thought.
Yeah, which is just the section that's right behind this building.
And it's only going to do 2 blocks, and that's for actually
From-
doing the work.
From east, right, construction work from East Chestnut Street to East Orange Street.
And what type of construction is it going to take other than painting lines on? I just need to know, because I don't
Paving,
know
there's
what the bike lanes are.
curb bump outs, there's work definitively behind where the new garage is because of, that has to be changed around from what the old hotel parking area there was off of Chestnut, off of Chestnut Street to come in through so that it is a bike boulevard, but I believe no
And
motorized
pedestrians.
vehicle.
I mean, there was a wall there, do you remember, Darlene?
yeah.
So that wall came down, and now there's, because of all the construction back there, the paving, there's a huge pothole back there that regularly needs to be filled. And so all of that is going to be redone. So there's the construction of that is what this is helping to pay for. And it's really expensive to pave.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I
It is
know, I know.
really
I just thought it was, I thought if it was construction, it was going to be bump out for the curbs and stuff, and I didn't understand why that was not in the budget with the ADA that comes and requires us to do the bump out and the handicap ramp. Why
That's a whole other
The
can of
ADA
worms.
is a different
why that
element.
wasn't included, you know, I'm just trying to make sense of what we're doing. So you did say that the 2020 Paving Street is going to add on to the 2016.
Yeah, so
paving.
this, the 175 here
Mhm.
adds on to the 775 from the 2016 bond fund. Those two together, plus liquid fuels funds, plus some amount of CDBG funding is what would total the nearly $2 million for street paving in 2022.
Right. And so since we have this extra money for allocations, have you thought about using the CDBG funds for the community versus for street paving? And actually put it back into the community, what CDBG funds are for?
So, and the reason I've been hedging on a number in CDBG is that is a decision to be made later.
Oh,
And we have actually in, I believe at least the last year, reduced the street paving number. The allocation of CDBG to street paving was reduced in 2020.
We do have a 5-year consolidated plan.
Right.
For the funds, and for the street improvements category, that has come down a little bit, so the funds can be reallocated. Right, them CDBG dollars, you mean? And when would that take place? Would that go before council as well, or how does that happen?
There's an annual plan for those dollars, in addition to that 5-year plan
Right,
that Mr. Dels was talking about. So we talk about that annually as well.
okay, so would there to be another resolution or something that'll come before council?
Correct.
We'll have a chance to make a comment.
You got it.
Very good. And then if I could just have a copy of that, I won't go through because I couldn't actually see all the little fine print that was up there for the different projects.
We have
But I
extras.
would
think there's
like
some
to be able
extras.
to look 'em over
Mhm.
and see that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Patrick.
Sure, you're welcome.
Okay, so that was resolutions 54 and 55. Any other comments? I see Mr. Dastra. I was gonna say.
So, Tony Dasher, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. I don't particularly have any questions coming off the top of my head right now on the subject, but since we are talking about the bike paths, I took them today and I took them the other day, and as much as I love seeing us invest in bike infrastructure, and I think that biking is good for the transportation fabric of the city, I'm concerned that us sectioning off and creating these protected bike lanes is actually endangering bikers more, because I almost got hit by a car. I was in the protected bike lane and I almost got hit by a car making a turn. Water Street. So I understand that, you know, there's a mutual responsibility between like pedestrians, bikers, drivers to all be attentive to an extent. But I consistently feel like we're relegating the lower, quote unquote, lower forms of transportation, biking, walking, to the side, literally. I'm biking over sewer grates. I'm almost getting hit by cars making left turns, and I'm using these protected lanes. I don't feel safe in these protected lanes at this point. That's a concern for me. And while I do think I'll absolutely feel safe on a street where bikes are only permitted and cars are not allowed, I am terrified of distracted drivers. That being said, I still feel safer in the actual flow of traffic than popping through traffic out of a protected bike lane. So yeah, I don't really need an answer or defense. I just want to say my piece because I almost got hit by a car.
Tony, I'd love to go out and ride those protected lanes with you and understand a little bit more about what your experience is.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you for sharing. All right. If we could take these together, Mr. Harris, would that be okay? I'd like to make a motion then to move resolutions 54 and 55 to full council on Tuesday, the 12th.
Second. It's only us.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, okay, now we'll be talking about Administration Bill number 22, which is authorizing appropriation of American Rescue Plan Act funds. And I believe, counselors, we also received that today.
So I'm gonna take this one.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. So this is the first request to council for an authorization to use $5 million to invest in affordable housing funds. And this is going to be a resolution that you will be voting on at the last meeting of the month. And so this is going to be a scaffolding conversation. So tonight, just want to introduce this as a concept at our next meeting on October 12th. Chris, Mr. Delfs is going to be presenting research from the Center for Research Analysis, as well as the outline of our interim housing strategy. That housing strategy will inform the investment and utilization of these $5 million. I want to just say a couple of things about where we are in the process related to the American Rescue Plan Act. We are engaging in it's been awesome, the amount of feedback that we've gotten from the public, including letters to the editor. There was one, I think, this morning or yesterday about street trees. And that engagement is continuing through the end of October. However, we have an opportunity related to affordable housing that we could potentially see 50 to 60 new units and potentially more. We're still working through a couple of other concepts, and the preservation of affordable housing, which would be another 7 units. So we have this opportunity now, which is why we're bringing this to you at this time in October, in addition to the fact that this has been a pressing priority that council has known, that individual councilors has expressed and elevated, as well as many council meetings we have talked about the lack of affordable housing. So we wanted to both seize this opportunity, advance something that is very specific and responsive to the needs of the community, while we're also continuing to collect feedback about the prioritization of the remaining funds. This does not mean that this is a once and done. This is maybe a first ask. It may be more over time. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew at this moment. And so, that's where we are related to ARPA engagement and this additional request. The other thing that we're sorting through, and we had a really informative conversation about, is what the requirements will be of the recipient organizations. So the requirements of ARPA funds for recipient organizations will be the same as they are for the city of Lancaster. And right now, I think that's a 38-page reporting document that is due. There's different deadlines that the Treasury has, the U.S. Department of Treasury has promulgated, and they're still finalizing the rules, so we're still working under interim rules, but we are trying to sort that out, and we're not entirely, between the legal and the accounting requirements that are required to utilize ARPA funds, we're not entirely prepared at this moment, and we want to really be clear about what those requirements are as we make investments in our community for what our partners are going to need to do to receive these funds. And so I just say that to say that's also happening while we're also collecting feedback from the community, while we're seizing opportunities that are before us related to affordable housing, and while we're also doing the comprehensive planning process and our own strategic plan. So last meeting, I presented our strategic plan and talked about housing as being one of the priorities within Strong Neighborhoods. This is part of that, as well as our critical repair program, our lead remediation program, and so on. So I'm going to ask your forbearance for this meeting tonight to hold until we can get through October 12th. And I think we're going to have an even richer conversation at the last meeting of the month as we build the portfolio, if you will, of the interim housing and what we're bringing to council. So for now, tonight, I just wanted to give you sort of a sense of where we are related to the entirety of the ARPA engagement. And we are looking forward to bringing to council a summary of the engagement and what we heard back after October 30th. And so as the city staff are processing that and taking that in, we'll also be sharing that with all of council and the public, of course. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to be clear, and I'm looking forward to moving this forward so we can continue the conversation, will the bill be amended later to include more specifics about the projects, or will it remain sort of a big bucket bill that says that this particular amount is going toward this particular purpose?
So it will be, the way that we think this is going to work is that we're going to ask council to appropriate X dollars, and then we're going to bring these projects, rather than voting on each specific project. But there's we want your feedback about the strategy. We want your feedback as like in terms of what criteria, that we're working through. Obviously, we're looking at number of new units. We're looking at production and preservation as goals. And this is all things that Chris is going to go into a lot more in October 12th.
Great. Thank you. Questions from the committee?
Yes, if I may.
Yes.
When we're discussing affordable housing, and I looked at this bill, and when it refers to private companies and developers, who are we talking about? Is it the same people that build the condominiums? Is it, Habitat for Humanity? I mean, I kind of want to understand where, because the community sees where all the money goes. They see how they feel like they have been let down so many times. So when we're talking about developers, if you can give me kind of like whether it's broad or
Yeah. So as you know, Councilor Diaz, a lot of the development that happens in the city happens without any public subsidy that provides for affordable housing. And when we're talking about developers, we're talking about, there's really been two types of developers: mission-driven organizations like HDC, Partners with Purpose, Habitat for Humanity, SACA, that are very much focused from a mission-driven perspective to provide affordable housing, also building housing or ensuring first-time home ownership. There's the private developers, which I think is what you're asking about, that we've been approached by at least, I guess, a couple of private developers who are interested in allocating a certain number of units to be affordable. And while we've never and do not have plans at this moment to engage in any project like that, we are continuing to have conversation about what that could potentially look like and how long those covenants could be extended. And what's the return on investment for public dollars into a project in which, let's say, we get 15 or 20% of units dedicated to some percent of city AMI, for example, for 15 years, which is, we're using 15 years because that is the HUD requirement for any time you use HUD funding. You have a deed restriction for those properties for 15 years. So that's what we're talking about related to private developers. Is there a way that we can use private or public funds to offset costs for a certain number of units to be set aside for a period of 15 years? And we continue to have those conversations. We have not come to, we do not have any projects at this time that we would be bringing forward that include a private developer. The projects that will be talking about later this month are with mission-driven organizations who have this as their as part of their vision as an organization. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions from the rest of council? No? Questions, comments from the public? Tim?
Tim Stuhlter, One United Lancaster. This is, I think, builds on Councilwoman Bakay's question and Councilwoman Diaz's comment or question. How much information will City Council have about the specific projects this will be used to fund prior to the vote. And if the information is incomplete, it certainly seems possible that once they know everything about the project, they might have concerns or might even want to claw back some of the money. Would they have that opportunity?
Yeah, and all of the projects that we've been discussing, I have been reviewing with council president. So I want to just make sure that there's not some shroud of secrecy about this. But I also say that we are not all the way through the process for some of these projects, but at least two of them. We only have 3 that are on the table right now. 2 of them we will be able to share, and we're getting write-ups that we'll be providing to counselors later this month. And so I'm happy to share the details, just trying to set up the conversation and to have all the information that's available. We've been working really quickly to try to pull these together, and there are legal, just accepting the Arpa funds comes with a lot of requirements. And one project involves a purchase of real estate for the development. And so there's those considerations that are in the mix as well.
So to confirm then, on 2 of the 3 projects prior to the vote at the end of the month, you'll be able to say, it's over here, it's thus and such.
Yep. And possibly the 3rd. We're working on it.
Right. Important to remember that we'll get a first read and a second on the 28th.
Yes.
The date. So we'll have 2 more chances and that almost a month of time. It sounds
Yeah.
like.
And so I think I would say tonight's conversation is setting up a months-long conversation.
And you've talked about there's some kind of time element to this. This is the first act, the first ask rather. What is the need to do this quickly? Apparently, possibly even before the full information on the 3rd project can be publicly disclosed.
There's the 2 that are teed up. I think that there are real estate transactions that have time limits on them.
And the 3rd?
And the 3rd has to do with their pro forma and the degree to which they're able to secure other funds.
Thanks much.
Darlene.
Okay, so just so I understand, you are going to this is an ordinance, it's going to have its first read at City Council on Tuesday, and you're asking council to vote to give $5 million to affordable housing without an identified project.
Not identified tonight, but will be identified at the time of first reading.
So it will be identified by Tuesday's meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the other things, you keep saying strong neighborhoods and affordable housing. What do you think makes strong neighborhoods? Or how do you think you can use money to build strong neighborhoods?
So Darlene, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you about the strategic plan. And I know that Bernie's reaching out to you to set up a meeting. And so, yeah,
Yes.
and so I just want to be respectful of the counselor's time because the ordinance is about this specifically.
Okay, so then as far as the $5 million in the projects, what is affordable housing? And I know with HUD, you say 15 years, but I think it depends on how much money is used in the project determines how many years HUD will put the restriction on the property. Is that not true? Good evening, Darlene. Hi, Good evening, Chris. counselors. Yes, that is correct. It does vary according to the different HUD programs. Depending on how much money they put into it. Correct. So in most HUD programs, it's a 15-year requirement for the affordability of those low to moderate income housing units. And then the programs also vary according to the income level that's targeted. So sometimes you have programs that are focused more on 60% AMI or 80% AMI or very low income, such as 30% AMI.
So do we know what these projects are going to be focused on? 60, 30?
For the new construction, we have, yes,
And that is?
that all information, like, when I say that the numbers are being crunched right now, they are literally being crunched right now. I'm sorry, I can't answer all of the details.
Okay.
Please come back on the 12th. We'll be happy to share with you more.
And when we say affordable housing, can you,
So there are different income levels, and these projects address different income levels.
so I would just ask council with, the lack of information that I was able to receive tonight, that you would at least make sure you get the answers. Don't just vote on putting $5 million because we say affordable housing. Yes, housing is in need and affordable housing is in need, but that needs to be identified. I mean, we just passed, I don't know how many projects, Chris and I went over this so many times, within the city that council approved that has very little or no affordable housing. From Willow Street to Landis Valley Homes, it's getting 5. Come on, we can't spend $5 million and say we're getting 50 units and then 7 more. Only 57 units.
Well, that
and
was
no-
just 2 projects, Darlene, if I could interrupt. And I
okay.
do really appreciate your advocacy and that you want this detail, and I really want to provide it, and I want to make sure that it's correct.
Okay, I was just addressing, I thought this meeting was where I could address.
Go ahead, Darlene.
Okay, thank you, council. And I just want to say that, we do say affordable housing, but think about it. And President, you sit on the Homeless Commission. To say we're taking $5 million and we're going to get 57 affordable housing units, we got to do better than that.
Can I
We-
just interject?
Oh.
That's only for a portion of the 5, that's not $5 million. When I'm
Oh.
talking about 50 to 57 units, that's not $5 million. So I just want to be
Okay.
clear about that.
That's just the information that I got. I'm sorry.
No,
Like you
just
said, we need to
clarifying.
get it, but I'm just asking council to please, do your homework and see. We approved a lot of housing. I only mentioned 2. There's like 8 different projects. I can even say 9 if we count the one on New Holland Avenue by the science factory that went up, the houses that went up there. And they do not, from Stadium Road to, all the houses, the Redmonds that's coming up. And we don't address affordable housing. And we really, if that's what we say we're going to do, I want to hold you to it. I want you to be accountable for it and really get those answers.
Thank you,
And I'll
Darlene.
wait till the 12th. That'll be a council meeting or just another meeting that I can come to?
It'll be the regular council meeting on the
And
12th.
that's where we'll get all the information.
Yeah.
So that's
long as we
when
move-
Mr. Delfs is going to be presenting the research from the Center for Research Analysis. We're going to be presenting the interim housing strategy, because we're doing the comp plan at the same time. That's going to be the framework from which we're making recommendations to council for the ARPA funds.
Okay. And
Thank you.
Just because we did research and we talked about it, can you really use some numbers that are Lancaster and not countywide? When we looked up, we said how many Black people got houses, we couldn't provide that answer for the city. We could do it for the county. But if we're really going to address this city, the numbers that we're getting are county and not so much city. And we met several times and asked questions to find out what those numbers are. So we're charging you.
Thank you, Darlene. I want to just to kind of put a pin in it and say that I take what you say to heart, and I'm really looking forward to hearing these and having the public hear these, because in so many of those cases that you've listed before, we didn't have the opportunity to inject affordable housing, and these funds are giving us the opportunity to do that. So I'm excited about doing that and excited about hearing the details and all of those specifics and how they relate to the city directly, because so many times we don't get a chance to ask those questions. So thank you.
I have one more question, if I may.
Sure.
Bacon. In regards to once you have, the development comes with all the 3 that you're referring to, will that be also in public eye? Will LMP or whatever newspaper, One Way, would they get that prior to our meeting so they can take, I mean, generally, we do advertise, but I'm curious to know if this information will be advertised prior to the meeting.
So we can certainly share the details with the press on October 12th. That will be 2 weeks before council would vote on any allocation of funding. And again, this is not typically how we like to operate. We're building the plane and flying it at the same time is how I would describe these first steps as we continue to solicit the feedback from the community through the end of the month, and then addressing these significant opportunities related to affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Sure. All right. Hearing no further comments from the public, I'll make a motion that we move Bill 2022 to full council for first reading and further discussion on Tuesday, October 12th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Council President, that concludes the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Councilor Bakay. That moves us to the Public Works Committee. I will handle this since both Councilor Soto and Arroyo aren't here.
Okay. I see it on my screen, but I don't see it on the common screen. There it is. Okay. So this is the presentation of the proposed regulation changes for the street cleaning and street sweeping regulations. For the most part, I'm just going to focus on the regulations that change themselves and give a brief summary towards the tail end of what I had presented previously, so you understand what the relations are. So if you'll remember, the problem to be solved is cleaning the streets. It sounds obvious, but it's a greater challenge than many people often imagine. Cleaning the streets, especially after a snowfall, making the non-snow emergency routes passable, cleaning streets for regular passage, and liberating parking spaces quickly after a snow emergency, being able to provide for performing repairs in the public right-of-way, and provide less inconvenience to parking. The key current regulations that are challenges to us being able to take the performance of street cleaning to a different level are summarized here. One, current regulations are silent on how to resume cleaning after snow emergency. Two, we need to expand street cleaning to mean maintenance for snow cleaning and repairs, not just cleaning. There is restricted parking for opposite side needs. That restricted parking needs clarity and enforcement. There are narrow streets which provide challenges to the opposite sides, and the way that it's currently written is very unclear. And we need to codify basic practices as not exceptions to the rule, but as the rule. So I'm just going to go quickly one by one. The current regulations are silent on how to resume cleaning after snow emergency. So the regulation sections 262-21 have a section A, which relates to the initiation of a snow emergency, and a section B, which relates to the ending of a snow emergency. But then there's that vague period directly after the ending of a snow emergency of when do things start to get back to normal. So what we're proposing is adding a section C, which makes it clear, makes a couple of things clear. One, that commencing an hour declared by the mayor that the snow emergency regulations are no longer in effect, all parking restrictions regarding street cleaning referenced in Article 9 shall be reinstituted and be in full force and effect to assure that the city may clean and clear all such streets of snow including areas on such streets designated for parking. So this is trying to restate and codify that the street cleaning ordinance is in effect at all times except when there is an emergency. And this vague period of several hours or several days after a snow is no longer going to be vague. It will be that once the snow emergency is declared as ended, the regular snow maintenance, snow or street cleaning commences. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. The next proposed regulation change is an amendment, meaning that we need to expand the street cleaning to mean maintenance for snow cleaning and repairs. Currently, it only talks about cleaning. We want to be able to include and add into that regulation that street sweeping and street cleaning shall include cleaning and/or sweeping the streets of any and all debris, trash, refuse, leaves, and snow. By including this in the regulations, the current signage can continue to apply. So we do not have to replace all the signage throughout the city. Any and all signs promulgated restricting parking on streets for purposes of street cleaning shall restrict and/or prohibit parking for all of the services and reasons set forth within this definition of street sweeping. So if you see that there's opposite side of the street parking or whatever, that is in aid of whatever we need to be able to do to maintain the street, to clean the street, to repair the street or whatever. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the logistics in a moment. The next proposed regulation, there is disclarity about the opposite side of the street parking for street cleaning, and there is a situation that creates a significant problem for us as we try to clean the streets, especially the very narrow streets where there's parking on one side of the street. So currently, the regulations allow that on any street, even if it is a very narrow street, people can park on the opposite side of the street waiting for the street cleaner to come by, whether it's for cleaning the street or for snow removal. So you have a situation, if you look to the diagram towards the right, you often have situations where people are parking on the sidewalk across the street or parking so that traffic cannot pass, which also means a street sweeper cannot pass and a snow remover cannot pass. So what we are proposing is that on these very, very narrow streets, that you are not allowed to park on the opposite side of the street. However, which will be the case across the city, once the street sweeper has gone by, you can move your car back. You don't have to use that entire window. But again, there's another caveat, which I'll get to in a few moments. So on streets on which parking is restricted to only one side thereof, vehicles may be parked on the this is the part that gets rescinded. This is the lower piece is what is currently written, and this would be rescinded so that on the narrow streets, we have the ability to clean the street or clean snow from the street. The other piece which relates to narrow streets is when it's very poorly written. Currently, it's very poorly written. So we wanted to make a little bit of clarity that except as provided above in the regulation that was just described, in the case of narrow streets, and narrow streets are not necessarily the very narrow streets. Narrow streets where parking is allowed on both sides, parking on other streets may be resumed prior to prescribed times if the section of the street involved has been swept on that day. That really applies to all streets. Unless we are choosing to use the window of street cleaning to do maintenance, in which case we will put up signage so people know that we are using that entire window. But otherwise, the regulation that allows you to move your car and then move back to your parking space will remain. And the last of the regulation changes, there is a regulation that indicates that there are exceptions to the rules, that the provisions of this article shall not apply at times when the streets are covered with snow and cannot be swept. This is part of the regulation that creates a lot of the confusion. So what we want to do is be able to rescind and repeal this particular piece of the registration, of the regulation, so that we set up the paradigm that street cleaning regs are in effect at all times, except for in the declaration of a snow or weather emergency. That allows us to do what we were able to successfully do this past winter, which was to be able to clean the streets in a relatively effective way, and we had less impact than in previous years. It would allow that if snow emergency is declared, ends on a Wednesday night, and your street cleaning day or your opposite side of the street cleaning day is Thursday, the goal is that you would move your car from the parking lane on that Thursday so that your neighborhood, your area can be cleared of the parking lane on that day after the snow. What it usually will mean for us is we may declare the end of the snow emergency a little bit later than we might have in the past to make sure that all the snow emergency routes are actually clean curb to curb, and that we have the means and the passage to get to each of the 8 quadrants, or 8 octants. They're not quadrants. The 8 cleaning areas. So again, it's reinforcing that street cleaning is always in effect. This is just a reminder of some of the effect that we had. In 2018, there was one large snow emergency where there were 234 tows and 637 tickets. In all of 2020, we had 3 snow emergencies. They may not have been as severe as the one in 2018, but the numbers were significantly less than what we had. And we account for that partly because of additional and better messaging to the public so that they had better knowledge of what the expectations were, better coordination between not only the DPW and the parking authority, but the police. And again, just continuing to be more proactive in the messaging and having alternatives to removing the vehicle where we could. Now, in that particular case, we didn't have specific alternatives to removing the vehicles, although earlier in the year during COVID, we've had some success in having alternate parking opportunities. So this allows us the opportunities that we have here to better our game in terms of street cleaning is to extend snow emergency till snowfall ends, extend emergency until snow emergency routes are fully clear, active messaging, so that you know that you'll have parking lanes available no later than the 8th day after a snow, and your streets parking lanes get cleared. Yes, I just said that. Ongoing snow removal continues throughout the city at all times. Where to park? We still need to explore some of these options. Obviously, during a snow emergency, parking is made available and free in the Lancaster Parking Authority facilities. That continues. Just as a quick note, at the height of January snow, there were still 1,190 spaces available in the Lancaster Parking Authority facilities, which meant that they were at about 2/3 capacity. There was 1/3 of the capacity still available. Granted, LPA facilities are not equally distributed throughout the city, but they're often where some of the tightest parking actually is, but not where all of the tightest parking actually is. So we do want to be able to explore how do we reach out to those entities that might be willing to make their parking facilities available. Current practices to revisit, and this goes to certain proactive elements. After the sweeper goes by, again, we commit that whether the limited parking window has expired or not, people can return their vehicles to the now swept lane. So that means if your window is from 8:30 to 11:30 and the sweeper goes by at 10, you can move your car back in directly after the sweeper goes by. However, there will be occasions when the city needs the entire window for maintenance or repair. That'll be for trimming trees, for repair of curbs or streets for some other reason, or whatever the need might be. In those occasions where the city needs the full window, we will put up temporary signage to that effect. So our team has geared itself up so that on those occasions where we need it, we can put up the temporary signage. We will be working closely with the utilities as well, so that to the greatest extent possible, utilities will use that same window, and we will put the same signage up so that they will do it. We don't have a guarantee from the utilities that they will be able to abide by this goal, but it is a goal, and it goes towards building a better working relationship with those utilities and with the people that we serve. So that, in summary, is the changes in the regulations and a little bit of what we had talked about, what I had presented at the last committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I just want to say that those tickets that were written in 2018, many of them got rescinded. That was my first snow emergency on the first day of spring. Do you remember that? Actually, no, it was in January. There was a snowstorm. It was like, I think, my second week in office. Regardless, I think clarifying this, I also really appreciate the change in the rules that are being proposed that allows for cars to park after the street sweeper has gone through. This has been a major source of frustration. That's like, you know, I'm getting a ticket and the street sweeper's already gone through. That's super frustrating for folks. And also just the ability to clear the snow out of the parking lanes, which allows for more parking and also reduces the need to, I don't know, be stumbling out and trying to climb over piles of snow. And so I think that this is a way for us to also serve our residents better. So I appreciate Mr. Mr. Campbell's focus on getting this to the point to bring forward tonight for your consideration.
Do you have any questions, challenges, alterations that you propose?
I don't have any questions. I have a comment. Since you brought this earlier on, I've studied it and read it and looked at it over and over again. It's workable, and in the long run, I know it's going to be very beneficial to the citizens of Lancaster, but it is going to be challenging.
Yes.
I believe that the citizens of the city are going to be standing on their head.
So I understand that. I honor that. And I think that working with Amber and with DJ, we will be able to develop a messaging and an outreach to the public so that even hopefully long before the first snows, we have the ability for people to have an understanding of what's going on. Culture change is hard in the best of circumstances. Being able to show what the benefits to people might be is part of making that culture change. Part of it is consistently managing it, whether that means consistently enforcing it or consistently having a soft touch to it. But consistency is going to be a key element. My team is absolutely committed in terms of the amount and type of equipment that we currently have and the staff that we currently have, even though we're slightly short-staffed, to be able to meet these kinds of goals for street cleaning and for snow removal. But it's going to be a lot of messaging, and frankly, I may reach out to some of you to help us as we want to talk differently with the different communities.
Absolutely. Communication, I think, is going to be key.
Okay,
May I?
Please.
In reference to probably those that may not understand the lingo, or especially if they have a different second language, or first language versus an English second language, what way can we help them understand? Especially in Lancaster City, I would say maybe the Southeast, where we have a lot of Latinos and some of our new immigrants that have, some of them don't even understand that they cannot park at a certain time there, so how can we improve to make sure that they don't get their car towed because they don't understand?
we're in the process of developing a one-pager or maybe it ends up being a 4-pager, graphically represented that shows what some of these concerns are. It would be English on one side, Spanish on the other side, and there'll be the opportunity for people to link into the other language translation opportunities. But I think having something simple and graphic where people are not necessarily confused by the words themselves. Most people who are driving cars have an understanding of, I can park here, but I can't park there. We need to graphically just make it as accessible as possible. But I think, to your point, we're thinking about it, but because you're saying it, I think we'll put even more effort into making it as accessible as practical.
Thank you.
And that would be distributed by flyers. It would be distributed on social media and the variety of outlets that we have. It would be great if we can, before winter, have 1 or 2 even short public service announcements, which might be something that gets printed in the local newspapers.
May I make a suggestion, possibly, President or maybe Mayor? Maybe add a neighborhood engagement. I think that would be an opportunity to have Millsy or the other
Yep.
bilingual translator. I think that would be the opportunity to explain to them and maybe even have some kind of diagrams or.
Yep.
I think
think
that would
that'd be
be the
fantastic.
best. Because again, we do have illiterate people as well that we need to also, and some elderlies that may not understand.
Absolutely.
Mr. Campbell, and in fact, that's excellent, Councilor Diaz. At what point do we, and I'm sure you're probably already brewing this in your proverbial cauldron, but at what point do we shift to that modality really for all of our signage, right? So where, we're not just talking about like implementation or information about, snow emergency, et cetera, but when somebody pulls up to any number of the street signs that they may find in Pennsylvania, that there is some stronger graphical representation, or the signs are at the very least, bilingual. They don't have to be in Afrikaans, but, English and Spanish, you might think. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, of any demographic in the Commonwealth, the Latino population is the only one that's seen a relative population growth versus the whole population. And yeah, you pick it up what I'm putting down, I think.
Obviously, I would like it to happen as quickly as possible. I like to be able to coordinate it with some of the upgrades that we're doing in the Vision Zero initiative, because while we're making larger scale changes in the public right-of-way, that is an opportunity to change everyone's expectations of what the streets look like, how they feel, et cetera. However, language is a different kind of a challenge. People are using them whether we make the improvements or not. And I think we need to find some ways of doing it. It may be that even in this, I don't want to put Patrick or anyone on blast, but it may be that in this budget cycle, we try to identify some funding that starts to incrementally change up some of our signage so that over the course of several years or something, or over some sort of a steady pace, we're making these changes and changing the expectation so that one would expect that the signs are bilingual or multi-accessible rather than expect that they're not.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? Actually, I guess you're the only other committee member. So other questions from council?
Me, right? We can always put robots, and say, do not park. And in Spanish, no te parque ahí, por favor. No te
It's a
no te
whole other
estaciones.
problem.
Thank you, Counselor. And from the public? Oh, you're closer, Tim.
I'm looking at the ordinance and trying to see if what you were saying about like being allowed to pull back after the sweeper goes past and so forth. I'm not seeing that in the ordinance. Am I missing it, or is that more of an administrative decision?
I think in 285.91, there's the section that suggests that it's very poorly worded, and we want to clarify the wording. The wording that's proposed now might not be the final wording, but we want to propose wording that says, that makes it clear to people that you can, in fact, move back to, once the sweeper has come by.
Okay.
But I think that's what we were trying to change in this one. This is the one that talks about this is the reg that talks about when parking, you can go back to the other side.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing that in the draft that I have. So that's probably the problem.
We are still editing, and hopefully by getting input, we may make some of those clarifications.
Okay. So I guess then my question to council would be, what's the timeline for passing this if this is not the final version of the proposed bill? Are you still looking at a first reading later this month and a vote at the end of the month?
Yeah, that's one that goes to the committee chair, who is unfortunately not present. But I would encourage you to follow up with either Mr. Campbell, who is sitting right there, obviously, or Councilor Soto. But I think in terms of this meeting, I think my question to you, Mr. Campbell, would be, are you, I guess as we have just done previously, are you prepared to fill in the gaps as we move forward? Or
Yes, I am. We're fully expecting to go to 2 readings, 2 council-level readings after this one, after this committee meeting, that the purpose of having gone to the committee in the first place was to introduce the idea and get some feedback. The purpose of coming to this meeting also was to get some feedback and get exactly some of this kind of input so that we can present to you the final for the committee, I'm sorry, for the council meeting, the first reading council meeting.
and
Which would be this coming Tuesday?
This is up to
well,
the committee.
Yeah.
in typical fashion, it would be this coming Tuesday. We don't yet have a motion.
Okay. And then the one other question I had is typically how much lead time is given for declaring the end of a snow emergency and declaring the end of a snow emergency?
I'm still not quite hearing what.
How much lead time is given between the announcement of the end of the snow emergency and the actual end of the snow emergency?
I think that's a very good question. A lot of it depends on how severe we expect that snow to be. If it's a relatively light snow that's going to be gradually coming up, we know that it'll hit our target, which is around 8 inches at hour X. But if that hour is at 3 in the morning, we may want to declare earlier that evening.
And it sounds like you're describing the beginning of the snow emergency. My question is about the end.
The end would be when we have a clarity that all of the emergency routes are clear, curb to curb, and that we don't expect further accumulation. However, it varies from storm to storm. So I can't give anything absolutely certain. It's a conversation that the mayor and I and the deputy director for construction and operations have, as well as fire and police and the parking authority.
Yeah.
It's usually, Tim, I mean, honestly, it really does vary depending on all the factors. We try to give between 2 and 4 hours because once we declare the end of the emergency, then we have to give people time to move their cars appropriately, and we try to give appropriate time. And we also try not to make that like 6 a.m. when nobody's awake yet, you know, so.
Kind of what I was getting at.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Dastra? Okay.
You ready, Darlene? Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Just clarity, a question, and a comment. For clarity, that I understand that you say on one side of parking on the street, they would not be allowed to park on the other side?
Right.
Okay.
Because cars.
I understand the reason why. I'm just asking for clarity. And for council, I bring up Howard Avenue and Pershing Avenue where they only park on one side. So what they do is park halfway on the curb in the street. I think if we're really going to try to be successful at that without having a lot of residents coming in here you're going to need to tell them people where they can park. Unfortunately, we don't have no parking facility in the southeast. So while they are empty, they're not in the southeast or walking distance. So when you look at Howard Avenue and you look at Pershing Avenue, my concern would be where will those people park? And the other thing I would suggest, I think a lot of the complaints came in the wintertime, not so much that people had to move their cars. The complaints came because the street cleaner was coming down the street while there was snow. Now, if we saw a snowplow coming to move the snow, I don't think people would have complained as much when they got tickets. What happened is you had a street cleaner with brushes coming, and there's a sheet of ice in the parking area. So people didn't move their cars. The mayor got millions and millions of calls probably from residents being complained about getting tickets. So I think if we're going to promote this information, we need to say we're going to be coming to plow the snow, clean the snow, not just clean the street, because it don't make sense in no one's mind. Why would a street brush come and brush the ice? So I think that's, that needs to be clarity. And then I think people will understand, okay, we're trying to remove the snow. Like I said, I talked to a lot of people, and the other concern I had was construction permits. Right now, if a construction company is coming to rehab a home, they get a permit, they'll be able to park on the street. I think it's a 30-day, maybe 60-day.
Depends on what's going on, yes.
What's going on. And then when the street cleaner comes, they don't have to move and they don't get a ticket because they got the sign that says, police, you're allowed, a permit, you don't have to park. So that area doesn't get cleaned. Is that going to be addressed some way? If there's construction vehicle or something? I mean, for a long period of time, one day is one thing. But when you're there for a month and that whole area don't get cleaned through street cleaner because of vehicles parked there.
So I do think that that's a couple of different things. I take your point that we have to do messaging a little bit differently so that
Yes.
people understand there are reasons why in some cases we would send street sweepers down while there's still snow on the ground. But we need to communicate what those reasons are.
Right.
But when it comes to construction issues, our goal is to make sure that there's passage for vehicles and for pedestrians on those roadways.
Mm-hmm.
The construction areas, the construction entities are also responsible for cleaning their areas, and we may need to enforce
So if
them
they miss this,
differently.
if they're there when the street cleaner comes, it's their responsibility to make
Well,
sure that street area is
If we can
clean?
if we can make sure that we have passage on that street going beyond construction equipment,
Mhm.
then they would not have to move because they've got a permit to be parked in that parking lane.
Mhm.
But if there's debris accumulating and/or snow that's getting in the way, they are
Right.
responsible for being
Okay,
able to
okay.
clear that up.
And then my only other concern, and I'm thinking of Pershing and definitely Howard Avenue, is that it's going to create more issues with the permanent parking. We need to start really addressing this permanent parking. I don't want it to come to my block, and we're getting there where the residents are really fighting hard. And if we don't address permanent parking, because as soon as the Howard Avenue people go park on Dolphin Street, they're coming to the traffic commission, they're like, we want permanent parking. We don't want them parking here during the week when it's street cleaning, and that's twice a week. So we got to look at trying to address that as well. And I know the mayor's working on rewriting the permanent parking.
Yes,
We're
exactly.
glad to put some input. We've been talking to our neighbors.
Yep.
If you want to meet, we have some suggestions about, we went over the ordinance and how
Very
it
good.
reads. So we're willing to meet with you and talk about some changes.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Byrd. Mr. Dastra.
All right, Tony Dasher, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. Mr. Campbell, thank you for trying to clarify some of these rules for the people. Something that, several years ago I had mentioned that I think that fines are not necessarily the best way to be enforcing our parking laws like this because there's an education aspect, and I think a lot of people miss that education aspect because they don't understand like EPA guidelines, for example, or requirements. My question to you, especially considering how some of these parking issues really concentrate in the south end of the city, and we know the finances and how they play out when we look at census data, what can we potentially incorporate, much like we have in our decriminalization for cannabis bill, can we incorporate a manner for you can get your fine forgiven if you participate in some sort of educational or volunteer program I think to promote the sort of culture shift, we need to give people options that are not strictly pay this fine, it gets resolved, especially because there are people who can afford to park wherever and just, pay it off.
I'm certainly willing to entertain some options.
Okay.
One of the things that we're doing with our revamping of the Adopted program, the Adopt a Block program, is we're engaging these organizations and grassroots community groups in being part of our solutions. We reached out to them during the last two major rainstorms, and many of them were very happy to go out and clear some of the storm grates, because we can't be everywhere. There's 2,400 storm grates, and there's maybe 30 people who we could rely on, and if the rain keeps on going, more debris gets in them. But the Adopt the Block program, or the Adopted program, was a very successful way of getting people engaged in it. So I'm certainly willing to think of a variety of ways. I do think that one of the reasons we were successful this year in drastically reducing ticketing and towing was because of the outreach. And if we do more of that and get people used to the idea that this is how the city of Lancaster operates,
Right.
then we'll have fewer and fewer of those, and it'll grow by word of mouth that this is what you do in this particular area. And
Right.
I would say that in many ways, I don't know this for an absolute fact, but I can find out. Many of those tickets and tows were distributed throughout the city. They were not focused primarily on Southeast.
Right. Like, I know, yeah. I do want to note how funny I find it that, we as a city are working on this parking issue and car dilemmas. And I've driven through plenty of suburbs where they have a parking issue, and I just appreciate the work that you're doing, because this is definitely going to be something throughout a lot of our lifetimes we struggle with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dastra. Are there any other questions from the public? Okay, in that case, I would hear a motion to move Administration Bill number 21, 2021 to full council.
Sec.
All right. I guess I am the motioner,
I'm seconding it.
and Councilor Diaz is seconding. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. That concludes the Public Works Committee, and brings us to the Economic Development Committee. Councilor Bikeway, would you mind, or Councilor Craig? I'm reading off the list alphabetically since Councilor Arroyo isn't here.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you. I do not, and I'm hoping somebody's here to give us some.
Council President, we're just, Councilor Craig and I were just discussing, we don't have any additional information on Resolution 57, and it was introduced, it looks like, by Councilor Arroyo.
Hi, Councilor Arroyo, yeah.
So I don't know if there's anyone here that can speak to it, but if not, then I would make a motion that we table it.
I can speak very broadly to it, but we could, I believe it came from a Ms. Alyssa Anderson, who among other things was a member of the HRC Advisory Council, and directly to, and Councilor Arroyo. Mr. Harris, can you, for our benefit, briefly summarize the ordinance as you understand it?
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
I'll read the title and first few graphs. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Lancaster recognizing Fair Trade Month in the City of Lancaster, supporting fair trade and encouraging the administration of the City of Lancaster to purchase fair trade products when those products are available, meet applicable city standards, and comparably priced to the alternative. Whereas fair trade is an innovative marketing strategy that promotes fair labor practices and healthy, safe work environments through the production of food and other goods. And whereas fair trade provides producers with fair prices that translate into livable wages, and whereas production of fair trade goods is achieved through sustainable and ecologically friendly means, thus contributing to the future of a healthy planet for all, and whereas as consumers referring to referring to individuals as private and public entities, we have a responsibility to be aware of the impact that our consumption has on the communities and produce goods we purchase. And whereas we consumers have a voluntary choice to make such purchases of fair trade goods, and whereas we recognize that supporting our local economy by purchasing locally and ethically produced goods and services is in keeping with the fair trade, with the values of fair trade. And whereas the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania has the opportunity to lead by example and present a model of social responsibility for other municipalities to follow, now therefore be it resolved that when purchasing goods for the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania will consider procuring local and fair trade products when those products are available, meet applicable city standards, and comparably priced to the alternative. Be it further resolved that this city council encourages the members of our community to do likewise, and that the city of Lancaster and visitors to the city will gain a greater understanding of what it is, of what is and what is not fair trade in order to make educated decisions, and that the city supports Lancaster's initiative to become a fair trade city.
Well, there we have it.
The resolution.
There you go.
And my research tells me that October is Fair Trade Month.
Oh, okay. That's why we have a resolution.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
based on what Mr. Harris has said, I'll make a motion to move this to full council on the 12th.
Second.
You have a motion and a second, Councilor Craig, if you'd like to
All
invite
those
comment.
in favor?
Aye.
No comment. Aye.
Okay.
Were there, just to check, did anyone
Sorry about
from the
that.
public have a, okay,
Thank you for checking that box.
no problem. We're building the
sort.
plane as we fly it, as the mayor said here.
Exactly.
That brings us to, I'm sorry, you did not relinquish your committee. My apologies.
So sorry.
No worries.
That concludes
All right, thank you.
economic development.
I need to think of a better word than relinquish. That brings us to the Committee of the Whole. We have one item this evening for council's consideration, and in consultation with the state and local AFL, we have a resolution supporting the PRO Act, or the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, federal legislation which would advance the rights of working people to organize and bargain collectively. And I'll take this moment, since I have the floor, to note that today, the IATSE, the Theater and Stage Employees Union, which represents theater employees, film employees, et cetera, really across a variety of entertainment fields, voted 98% in favor of authorizing to strike in, seeking fairer conditions for the people that make the art and culture that we love and value. And indeed, we could not do what we do as a council, and the city could not do what it does without the many bargaining unit members who are employees of the city of Lancaster. So with that in mind, and with the knowledge that representatives from the state and local AFL would be present at the meeting, at next week's meeting, I offer council this, and we'll be happy to hear a motion or answer any questions that councilors have.
Second the motion.
Would you like to, I was actually calling for a motion, so if you'd like to make it, great.
A second.
You need a motion. I'll motion that we move this to full council then on October 12th.
And, yep,
A second. Sorry about
Late,
you're good.
late.
Oh, we're all catching up. Great. Any questions from council?
No question, Council President, but just a note to say that this move obviously would significantly increase people's ability to collectively bargain and earn more, which is always at top of mind. And being in a right-to-work state, we know that that suppresses wages. So this is significant.
Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Harris.
I'm sorry, roll call vote, Mr. President?
Yeah, we might as well.
Ms. Bakay?
Aye.
Ms. Craig?
Aye.
Ms. Diaz?
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. Thank you very much, all. That brings us to the clerk's report. Mr. Harris, I believe we have it in text. Would you mind foregoing the reading of your report this evening?
I have presented it to you in writing. I think suffice to say, after 2.5 hours of this meeting, I can say that I did stuff this month.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. That concludes our agenda. I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging in.